Her ex didn't want her back. He wanted control of the evidence or in control of her mind. At first, Arya believes she is escaping a cheating boyfriend. Clinically speaking, she is walking out of a coercive bond and straight into escalation. Luca's behavior shifts from infidelity to obsession, then to surveillance, threats, and territorial language. That is not heartbreak, that is possession panic. Adrian recognizes it immediately because men like Luca do not chase love, they chase lost leverage. The psychological shock here is brutal. Arya was never just his girlfriend. She was an asset he thought he still owned.
Public humiliation has a simple blueprint. Arya Bennett's plan called for a 10-second spectacle in a packed Manhattan club. By choosing a stranger for a kiss, however, she unwittingly sealed a pact with the city's most untouchable figure. Adrian Moretti existed beyond debts and sentiment, yet one kiss from her would shatter his world. As her ex flooded her phone and performance bled into passion, Arya teetered on the edge of buried truths. Our story opens on the collision. At Onyx, the base was a second carnal heartbeat vibrating through Arya's marrow. She stood near the VIP ropes where the champagne cost more than her apartment, watching light bleed across the room in hues of sapphire, gold, and raw, pulsing crimson. Bathed in that crimson wash, Luca Vance was a perfect contradiction, half idol, half devouring predator. He lounged on a sofa, one arm trapping a blonde in a tight dress, the other exploring the thigh of a brunette whispering to him. Then came his possessive laugh, a sound she once cherished, as his head fell back, a monarch overseeing a temporary kingdom. He was completely unaware she was there. Arya's grip tightened on her glass until her knuckles were white. For 2 full minutes, she hovered between disbelief and a building storm of fury, watching the man she'd given 8 months to act as if she didn't exist. Her text from an hour ago, "Where are you?" His lie, a client dinner. As the blonde's mouth found his neck and Luca's hand moved higher, something inside Arya ignited. It wasn't sorrow, it was the volatile, unadulterated catalyst for revenge. She turned sharply, the sound of her heels a clean crack of decision on the floor. The bartender, exuding skill in a fitted vest, noted her claim of an empty stool. Her glass hit the bar hard. "Whiskey," she ordered, "straight, and give me something that doesn't scream desperation." A ghost of a smirk played on his lips. "Rough night?" "It's about to be." He poured a heavy measure of the amber spirit. She drank half of it in one go, welcoming the fiery sting as a clarifying sort of pain. She set the glass down and exhaled, her mind a tempest. 8 months. 8 months of dinners, of private calls, of a Hamptons trip he'd postponed twice. 8 months she'd reshaped her entire existence around his, only to find she was cast as a minor player in his script. Her eyes drifted back to the VIP area. Luca was now the star of his own cheap drama, the blonde seated in his lap. Arya's jaw hardened into granite. "Another one?" the bartender offered. She signaled no. "I'm about to do something foolish." "Foolish is our signature drink." "So what's the play? A pathetic text? A tragic karaoke solo? How about something more theatrical?" "I need someone to kiss." The bartender's hand stopped polishing a glass. "I'm sorry." Arya pivoted on her stool, scanning the club's fauna, the wannabes, the money men, the inheritors. The room was full of people trying far too hard or not at all. That's when she saw him. He sat 3 seats down, alone. A single hand covered a glass of what looked like vodka. No phone, no company. He was just there, an island of absolute calm in the engineered storm. He seemed older, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair, a sharp jaw, and a suit tailored by a god. He projected a silent power that owned the space around him without saying a word, and he looked bored by it all. Arya stood. Adrenaline surged through her. her heart hammering a wild, chaotic beat. She walked straight to him, her heels a steady, determined rhythm, stopping right in front of him, his head lifted, his eyes, almost black in the dimness, locked onto hers with a force that stole the breath from her body. Not a smile, not a flicker of emotion, just a quiet, relentless stare. "I require your help," Arya said, her voice solid. His gaze flicked to her drink, then back to her. "I don't provide help. You don't know what I'm asking." "It makes no difference." She leaned in, near enough to catch his cologne, an expensive, subtle fragrance. "I need you to kiss me." For a long moment, he was perfectly motionless, then a corner of his lips quirked. Not a smile, but a flicker of private amusement at her nerve. "Why?" "Because the man I was dating is right over there," she said, nodding toward the VIP section, "and I need him to see how little I care." The man's eyes followed her gesture, taking in the whole sordid picture of Luca before settling back on her. An act of vengeance. A clean break. They're often the same thing, maybe. Arya pulled her shoulders back, her posture defiant. "Look, if you're not interested, just say so. I'll find somebody else." She started to pivot, but his hand shot out, encircling her wrist. The hold wasn't cruel, just absolute, halting her retreat. "I never said I wasn't interested." Her eyes dropped to his hand, then returned to his face. His features were still a mask, but his eyes were sharp now, calculating, as if he were weighing every possible outcome. "Your name?" he demanded. "Arya." "Arya." He repeated it slowly, testing its sound. He let her go and rose to his feet. He was colossal, at least 6'2", his frame so powerful it seemed to shrink the room. He gazed down at her, his expression a blank slate. "This is a mistake. Probably. You will regret it. That's a definite possibility." He gave a small, sharp nod, his assessment of her apparently finished. His hand then found her waist, the contact sending a jolt of electricity through her. "Then let's make it memorable," he whispered. And his mouth was on hers. It was not a gentle kiss. There was no warning. He just claimed her mouth, his other hand sliding to the curve of her spine, pulling her flush against him. Arya's breath hitched, her hands flying to his chest on instinct. In that searing instant, her motive evaporated. Luca was gone. The club, the crowd, all of it faded. There was only this man, whose mouth claimed hers as if she were the only thing left in the world. When he finally pulled back, his dark, unreadable eyes stayed on hers. "Was your objective met?" he asked. Arya blinked, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She tilted her head just enough to see the VIP section. Luca was on his feet, his stare a weaponized beam locked onto them. The blonde was a discarded prop on the sofa. His focus was total, fixated on Arya and the man whose nearness was an unforgivable violation. "Yes," Arya breathed. "It was." The man released her, his hand dropping from her waist. He picked up his glass, drained it, and set it down. "Then I wish you well," he said, and started to walk away. "Wait," Arya said. He stopped, glancing over his shoulder. "What's your name?" He studied her for a long, silent beat, as if weighing the consequences of telling her. Finally, one name broke the silence. "Adrian." And with that, he vanished. For 10 solid seconds, Arya didn't move, her lips tingling, her brain trying to catch up with what had just happened. All around her, the club's pulse was steady, oblivious. The bartender poured. A group of girls laughed loudly. The planet kept spinning, but hers had just been knocked clean off its orbit. "Arya." She turned. Luca was 5 feet away, his face a sculpture of pure rage. The women had vanished. "What the hell was that?" he seethed. Arya picked up her whiskey, finished it, and set the glass down with a quiet finality. "That," she answered, her voice ice, "was me leaving." "Leaving?" Luca's voice cracked. "You kissed some random guy in the middle of the club. And you had 2 women all over you in VIP, so I'd say we're even." Luca launched into a furious justification, trying to rewrite the scene. Arya was no longer listening. Grabbing her purse from the bar, she pronounced sentence. "It's done, Luca. We're over." He looked floored. "You can't be serious." She held his gaze with unwavering certainty. "I've never been more serious about anything." She started to walk away, but Luca grabbed her arm, yanking her back. "You're throwing away 8 months over some stupid misunderstanding?" Arya pulled her arm from his grasp. "It stops being a misunderstanding when your hand is up some other girl's leg." He said her name, but she was already gone from him. "We are finished," she declared, her voice empty of emotion. "Don't call, don't text, don't even think about coming to my apartment, just disappear." With that last command, she walked away, melting into the crowd and out into the night. She stopped on the sidewalk, breathing in the city air. 8 months gone in an instant. The feeling that settled in was a deep nothingness. Not sorrow, not drama, just an immense, hollow, and disturbingly peaceful emptiness. Her phone buzzed. It was Luca, of course. His text was in order. "We need to talk." Arya instantly blocked his number. A voicemail icon flashed. She erased it without listening. Shoving the phone into her purse, she walked into the night with no destination, needing only distance. Distance from the club, from Luca, from the ruin of her life. Yet after 3 blocks, a primal instinct surfaced, the cold prickle on her neck that meant she was being watched. She slowed, glancing back. The street was mostly empty, just a couple with a dog and a man in a dark suit on his phone. She kept walking, but the feeling wouldn't leave. Arya turned onto a quieter street, her heels clicking faster on the pavement. Another look. The man in the suit was still there, now about 20 feet back, phone still pressed to his ear. Her heart began to race. She made another turn onto a darker, more deserted lane. Then she heard it. A second set of footsteps, unnervingly steady, closing the gap. Arya's hand dove into her purse, desperately searching for her phone. As her trembling fingers tried to dial 911, an iron grip clamped down on her wrist. She spun around, her heart slamming against her ribs to see Adrian. "God!" she gasped, yanking her arm free. "You nearly scared me to death." He didn't apologize, his face a neutral mask. "Someone is following you." All she could say was, What?" Adrian's gaze shifted beyond her, down the street. The man in the suit was still there, his phone now lowered. The pretense was over. He was just watching. "Who is that?" Arya whispered. "No idea," Adrian said, "but he's been on you since you left the club." A cold knot formed in her stomach. "You can't be serious." Ignoring her, Adrian walked past her with a strange calm, heading straight for the man. The suit saw him coming, turned, and disappeared around the corner. Adrian watched him go before looking back at Arya. "We have to leave," he said, his voice low. "Leave where?" "Anywhere but here." Arya was frozen to the spot. Every instinct screamed at her to say no, to run, to not get into a car with a man she barely knew. But the alternative was a dark, empty street with an unknown pursuer. She looked at Adrian, who waited with an unyielding patience. "Fine," she finally agreed. But if you turn out to be a serial killer, I'm going to be seriously annoyed. Noted. He led her to the main street, where an idling black sedan waited. A driver in his 50s, sharply dressed, got out to open the back door. "Miss Bennett," he said with a polite nod. Arya's eyes widened. "How do you know my name?" Adrian was already in the car. "Get in." She obeyed, surrendering to a night of terrible decisions. The door shut, and the car pulled into traffic. The silence inside was thick. Arya hugged her door, Adrian his, with a wide gap between them. City lights streaked by the window in a neon blur. "So?" Arya finally broke the silence. "Are you going to tell me what that was about?" Adrian kept his eyes on the passing scenery. "Someone was following you. I stepped in." "Why? Why what?" "Why did you care? You don't know me." He finally turned to her, his dark eyes impossible to read but making her pulse quicken nonetheless. "You asked me to kiss you," he said quietly. "That made you my business." "My what? Your business?" "For now." Arya just stared, completely stunned. "That is, without a doubt, the weirdest thing anyone has ever said to me. You'll get used to it." "I don't plan on being around long enough to get used to anything." The corner of Adrian's mouth twitched into something like a smile. "We'll see." The car glided to a halt in front of a sleek glass and steel high-rise that screamed money. The driver opened her door as Adrian got out, looking back at her. "Are you coming?" "Where are we?" "My home." Arya's eyes narrowed. "No, that is not happening." "Do you have a better plan?" She tried to think of an excuse but gave up. Her apartment was a 40-minute train ride away. It was late, and the image of the man on the street was burned into her mind. "This is a terrible idea," she muttered. "So was kissing me. You're making a habit of it tonight." She shot him a glare but got out of the car. Adrian's apartment was exactly what you would expect, and yet still shocking. It was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the river and furniture so elegant it looked like it belonged in a museum. The quiet in the room was almost absolute. Arya stood in the living room, arms crossed, as Adrian took off his jacket. "The guest room is yours," he said, motioning down a hall. "Second door on your left." "I'm not staying." "Yes, you are." "Excuse me." He turned to her, his voice calm, but the statement absolutely final. "You are being followed until we figure out by whom and why you're staying here. You don't get to make that choice for me." "I just did." Arya gritted her teeth. "You're unbelievable." "I've been called worse." She glared at him, seething with frustration, but under the anger was another emotion she didn't want to name. "Fine," she snapped. "One night, then I am gone." Adrian just nodded. "One night." He walked past her without a sound and disappeared down the hall. Arya was left by herself in the vast, silent apartment, wondering what kind of mess she had just walked into. The guest room was as starkly perfect as the rest of the place. White walls, a huge bed, and a single painting that was probably worth more than everything she owned. She sat on the edge of the bed, still in her party dress, and looked at her phone. 3 missed calls from Luca, 2 voicemails, a string of texts. "Arya, talk to me. This is crazy. You're overreacting. Call me." She erased them all instantly. Then she just sat staring at the blank screen, unsure what to do next. A sudden urge to text someone, her best friend, her mom, rose up, a need for a link to her real life. But what could she even say? Hey, I kissed a stranger to get back at my ex. Now I'm in his penthouse because a stalker was after me. How was your Tuesday? She locked the phone and set it on the nightstand. Outside, the city kept up its never-ending pulse. Arya lay back, not bothering to take off her heels, and stared at the ceiling. Sleep felt impossible. When she finally woke, sunlight was pouring into the room. Arya sat up, feeling totally lost for a moment. Her dress was a wrinkled mess, her makeup smudged. She went to the bathroom, splashed her face with cold water, and looked at her reflection. She looked like she had survived a war. When she returned, Adrian was in the kitchen, leaning on a counter with a coffee mug and his phone. He was in a different suit, a sharp, dark gray. He looked like he had been up for hours. "Morning," he said, not looking up. "Morning," Arya said, her voice a rasp. She cleared her throat. "I have to go." "You have to eat." He pointed to a plate of eggs and toast on the counter. Arya hesitated, then sat down and picked up a fork. After a second, she asked, "So, are you going to tell me who you are?" Adrian put down his phone. "What do you want to know?" "We could start with why you have a driver, a penthouse in Tribeca, and why you acted like me being followed last night was a totally normal event." He took a slow sip of coffee. "I own a security company. We handle high-profile clients, stalkers, corporate spies, that kind of threat." "That's incredibly vague." "It's also the truth." Arya watched him. "And you just happened to be at that club?" "I go there sometimes. It's quiet." "Quiet? That place is one of the loudest in the city." "Not when you know the right spot." She put down her fork. "You're hiding something." Adrian met her eyes, his expression a closed book. "That observation is flawless." "And the reason for that? Because the full story is something you are not yet ready to hear." "That offers me zero comfort." A ghost of a smile haunted his lips. "And yet you remain." Arya's mouth parted for a comeback, but she snapped it shut. He was right. She hadn't bolted. And though every nerve screamed of peril, a part of her was deeply captivated. "I should be getting home," she stated, her voice losing its edge. "I need to change. I need to get my life in order." "Marcus will see you there." "Marcus?" "My chauffeur." "Of course his name is Marcus." Adrian rose, straightening the cuffs of his shirt. "I have an engagement in an hour. Stay as long as you need." He strode toward the exit, pausing at the threshold to look back. "Arya." She held his gaze. "You will not open the door for anyone," he warned. "And should Luca arrive, you are to contact me immediately." A cold knot of fear tightened in her gut. "How could you possibly?" But he was already gone. During the drive, Marcus took her back to her Brooklyn apartment, a compact studio in a repurposed warehouse that Arya had once loved for its exposed brick and unreliable water pressure. Standing at her own front door with the key poised, the immense weight of the last 12 hours finally crashed down on her. The apartment was a frozen tableau of the life she'd left that morning. Her coffee cup sat in the sink, her laptop screen was awake, and the throw blanket lay crumpled on the sofa. Nothing had physically changed, yet the feeling of a sanctuary had been utterly erased. Arya let her bag slide to the floor and sank onto the couch, gathering the blanket around herself. She stayed there, adrift, trying to piece together the shattered logic of her world. The end with Luca, a kiss with a total stranger being stalked, a night in a high-rise suite. What was her next step? Her phone buzzed. A restricted number. Some instinct told her to pick it up. "Yes, it is Adrian." Her heart gave a frantic flutter. How did you find this number? My profession is security, if you recall. That's deeply unsettling. It is comprehensive. A short silence hung between them. Are you inside? I am. Why? Good. Do not move. I'm sending a man over to replace your locks. Arya shot upright. What exactly are you doing? Fortifying your entry. A considerable improvement. What you have now is little more than scenery. Adrian. Allow me this one thing. A long sigh escaped her as she pinched the bridge of her nose. You can't just change the locks on my apartment on a whim. Actually, I can, and I am. This is a massive overreach. This is a precaution. His tone was eerily calm. You were a target last night, Arya. Until we know why, you are completely exposed. So I'm supposed to surrender all agency over my life to you? No. You are only to let me help you keep it. The sheer gravity in his voice crushed her protest. I have to go, Adrian said. The locksmith's name is Garrett. He will be there in 20 minutes. Do not admit anyone else. Adrian. But he had already disconnected. Arya stared at her phone, torn between a white-hot fury and another more disturbing feeling she could not place. She rose and drifted to the window, her eyes scanning the street below, and she saw him, Luca, leaning against a wall across the street, hands in his pockets, his gaze locked onto her building, just waiting. A nauseating cold spread through her veins. She flinched away from the window, her breath catching in her throat, but she couldn't tear her eyes away. Luca remained, a perfect statue of obsession. His stare fused to her building like it was the center of the known universe. Her fingers were dialing Adrian before her mind caught up. He's here, she whispered the second he picked up. Who is where? Luca, he's right outside my apartment, just watching. There was a pause, no more than 2 seconds, that felt like an eon. When Adrian spoke again, his voice was a different instrument entirely, low, sharp, and deadly. Lock your door. Do not leave the apartment for any reason. I am 10 minutes away. Adrian, you don't have to. 10 minutes, Arya. The connection died. She stood frozen, heart hammering against her ribs before she moved toward the door. She checked the deadbolt and slid the thin chain across. The very locks Adrian had called useless. He was probably right. Drifting back to the window. She peeked through the blinds. Luca hadn't moved, but his face was now lit by the sterile blue glow of his cell phone screen. Her own phone lit up. I know you're in there. A knot of pure ice tightened in Arya's stomach. She couldn't answer and couldn't block him. She just stared at the words. We need to talk. I'm not going anywhere until we do. Shoving her phone aside, she began to pace her small apartment, the room suddenly shrinking around her overwhelming panic. 12 steps to the kitchen, 12 steps back. Her mind raced. Call the police and say what? That her ex was standing on a public street? It wasn't a crime. Disturbing? Absolutely. A calculated act of control? Unquestionably, but not illegal. The phone buzzed again. You can't ignore me forever. Arya's jaw clenched as she grabbed the phone, her fingers flying across the screen. We're over. I was clear last night. Leave me alone. His reply was immediate. You don't mean that. You were upset. I get it. We can fix this. There's nothing to fix. It's done. Stop being dramatic. Come down here and talk to me like an adult. A tremor started in her hands, born from a fusion of incandescent rage and a fear so intense they felt like the same emotion. She typed a response, then erased it. Wrote another and deleted it. Just then, the piercing scream of her buzzer tore through the quiet. Arya froze, her gaze fixed on the intercom. It shrieked a second time, longer now, more insistent. She didn't move. The apartment fell silent. Then her phone started ringing, Luca's name flashing on the screen. She ignored it. It rang and rang and rang. On the fourth try, she broke. "What do you want, Luca?" "I want you to stop acting like a toddler and come downstairs so we can talk." "I have nothing to say to you." "Well, I have plenty to say to you." His voice was tight, the friendly mask completely gone. "You made a fool of me last night, Arya. In front of all those people. Do you have any idea how that looked? Do you have any idea how it looked with 2 other women hanging off of you?" "That was nothing. I told you she was—" "I don't care about your excuses. I saw it and I'm done." "You're not done. You're throwing a fit about something you completely misunderstood." A sharp, fractured laugh escaped her lips. "Oh, I understood it perfectly. You're a cheat and a liar, and I'm not wasting one more second of my life on you." "So that's your last word? You're just leaving? After everything I put into you?" "Everything you have." She stopped herself, taking a shuddering breath. "You know what? Yes, this is it. I'm leaving, and if you're not gone, I'm calling the cops." "For what? Standing on a sidewalk?" "For harassment." Luca's voice dropped to a low, chilling register. "Do you really think you can just walk away? Find some piece of trash in a bar and pretend we never happened?" Arya's heart stopped. "What I do now is none of your business." "It becomes my business when you embarrass yourself. Who was he anyway? Some gutter rat you picked up just to spite me?" "Leave now." "I'm staying right here until you come down and—" Arya ended the call. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost fumbled the phone. She set it face down on the counter, pressing her palms flat against the cold surface to stop their trembling. The buzzer screamed again. She ignored the insistent, grating noise. Then nothing. Arya held her breath, listening. Warily, she crept back to the window and peered out. Luca was still there, but he was no longer alone. He was talking to a man who stood beside a black sedan that had just pulled to the curb. As the vehicle's back door swept open, Adrian materialized. Relief crashed over Arya with such force she gripped the window frame to keep from buckling. He spoke to Luca, the words stolen by the wind, but the effect was instantaneous. Luca flinched back a step, palms raised in a universal sign of surrender. From 4 stories up, Adrian was an unmoving statue, his expression a cipher. Luca countered, gesturing toward the building. Adrian's head tilted in question before he advanced a single, measured pace. It was enough. Luca's mouth clamped shut, jaw tight, his hands dropping uselessly to his sides. The silent standoff held for another beat. Then Luca pivoted and vanished down the street, never looking back. Adrian tracked his retreat before his gaze shot upward, locking onto her window with an intensity she felt even from that distance. Her phone buzzed. "Let me in." Without a thought, she hit the intercom, granting him access. He was at her door in less than a minute. The door swings inward before his fist meets the wood. He crosses the threshold in a blur, his eyes making a rapid, tactical sweep of the space before they land on her. "Are you harmed?" A slight shake of her head was all Arya could manage. "No, I'm okay." He was clearly not convinced. What did he say? "Nothing important, just the usual, that I'm being unreasonable, that we need to talk this through." "He won't stop." "I know. Adrian's jaw clenched. He stalked past her to the window, his eyes scanning the empty street below. How long was he out there? I don't know, 10 minutes, maybe 15. And he was blowing up your phone. It was a statement of fact, not a question. Arya just nodded. Yes, and texting constantly. Adrian turned, his stare sharp and penetrating. Show me. After a brief pause, she handed over her phone. He scrolled through the messages, his face hardening with every line. When he saw the call history, 12 missed calls, he met her eyes. This isn't a heartbroken ex who can't move on, he stated, his voice low. This is escalating. He's just angry. He'll get over it. Do you actually believe that? Arya offered no reply because the lie felt like ash in her mouth. She had never seen this side of Luca. The possessiveness was a known quantity, the desire for control a familiar ghost. This, however, was a new and deeper shade of dark. Adrian handed back her phone, his voice leaving no room for debate. You can't stay here. What? This place isn't safe. He knows where you live. He knows your schedule. A man who will watch your building for 20 minutes to make a point is not a man who just disappears. So I'm just supposed to uproot my entire life, she thought. For now, yes. Arya could only stare, incredulous. You can't be serious. I am 100% serious. Adrian, I can't just... You can, and you are. He pulled out his own phone, his fingers flying across the screen as his eyes stayed locked on hers. Pack a bag for a few days, just the essentials. You're staying with me. No, there is no way. This is not a negotiation. It's my life you're negotiating. And I intend to see that you keep it. His words hit her with the force of a physical impact. Her mouth opened to object again, but she snapped it shut. Because under all the anger and fear, a quiet voice admitted he was right. Fine, she finally whispered. But just for a little while, until this blows over. Adrian didn't argue, offering only a sharp, confirmatory nod. Get your things. I'll wait here. Arya pulled a duffel from her closet and began to stuff it with random articles of clothing. Jeans, shirts, underwear, running shoes. Her motions were robotic, a physical routine to numb the psychic wound of being forced from her own home. All of this because of Luca, the fallout from one meaningless kiss. When she returned, Adrian stood in the doorway, phone to his ear. Yes, tonight. Have the West guest suite made ready. A short pause. No, she will be alone. Another silence. I will explain later. He ended the call, his attention returning to her. Ready? As I'll ever be. They took the stairs instead of the elevator, a calculated move by Adrian that Arya, too exhausted to question, simply followed. On the ground floor, he stepped out first, his eyes making a full 360 sweep of the street before he nodded for her to follow. Marcus was waiting by the car, the rear door already open. Arya slid inside, Adrian following a second later. The locks clicked shut as they pulled into the flow of traffic. In the side mirror, Arya watched her building shrink into the distance, a cold, heavy stone settling in her gut. This was only temporary, just for a couple of days. Luca would come to his senses, realize how insane he was being, and finally back off. Then things could go back to normal. But even as she thought it, a part of her knew it was a carefully constructed fantasy. Beside her, Adrian was a silhouette of stone, watching the city lights streak past. After a long, tense silence, he finally spoke. We need to set some ground rules. Arya turned to look at him. Ground rules? In my home, you follow my protocols. That means you don't leave alone, you don't open the door without my explicit say-so, and you have zero contact with Luca. I already blocked him. Oh, good. Keep it that way. She crossed her arms over her chest, a shield of defiance. Anything else? Yes. If anything feels off, you tell me immediately. You don't rationalize it, you don't second guess it, you just call me. Arya studied him, trying to read the man behind the stoic mask. He seemed perfectly calm, like this was just another Tuesday. But his eyes told a different story. They held a sharp, possessive glint that felt dangerously close to ownership. "Why are you doing this?" she asked in a low voice. Adrian's head turned, his eyes finally meeting hers. "Doing what?" "All of this. The security, the guest suite, this list of rules. You barely know me. We had one kiss. That doesn't make you my knight in shining armor." He held her stare for a long, silent moment. "Maybe not, but it still makes me responsible." "That makes absolutely no sense." "It doesn't have to." The car slid to a halt in front of his building. Marcus was already moving to open her door. Adrian got out first, offering a hand to help her. She took it, and that same disquieting jolt of electricity arced between them. Inside the penthouse, the air was just as she remembered, sterile, silent, and heavy with wealth. Adrian set her duffel down in the hall. "The guest suite is down that hall, last door on the right. It has its own bath. Settle in." "Thank you." He gave a slight nod, already pulling his phone out again. "I have a few calls to make. If you need anything, let me know." Arya watched as he walked down the corridor and disappeared into his office, leaving her completely alone in the vast, quiet space. She grabbed her duffel and found the guest room. The space was larger than her entire apartment, dominated by floor-to-ceiling windows, a king-sized bed with stark white bedding, and a reading nook with a leather armchair and bookcase. Arya dropped her bag and collapsed into the chair, staring out at the sea of city lights below. This was all completely insane. Less than 24 hours ago, she had a boyfriend, a weekly plan, a normal life. Now she was hiding out in a billionaire's penthouse from an ex who wouldn't take no for an answer, all while caught in the orbit of a man whose kiss felt like a brand and whose words sounded like he owned the world. Her phone vibrated, a text from a number she didn't recognize. A cold dread pooled in her stomach. "You think he can keep you safe? You're wrong. I'll see you soon, Arya." A tremor ran through her hands. She stood, her heart hammering against her ribs, and walked straight to Adrian's office. The door was ajar. She pushed it open and stepped inside. He was at his desk, the phone still pressed to his ear. His gaze snapped to her as she entered, his focus dissolving into sharp-edged alert. "I have to go," he stated flatly, severing the connection. "What is it?" Wordlessly, Arya held out her phone. "This just came." He took it, his eyes burning over the text, a muscle tightening along his jaw. "When?" "Seconds ago." He was already moving, pressing his own phone to his ear. "Do not move from this room! Adrian, stay here!" He was gone, his voice a low, hard command in the hall. Arya sank into the leather of his desk chair, a tremor seizing her body. Through the open doorway, she could catch fractured pieces of his call. "I need a trace. Yes, now, to hell with protocol. Find me a location." She wrapped her arms around her torso, fighting to steady her own breathing. Events were accelerating, a runaway engine pulling her along its tracks. Adrian returned moments later, his face an unreadable slate. "It's a burner, untraceable." So what's our move? We proceed as if it is Luca, and we treat this as his opening salvo. Do you think he'd actually hurt me? Adrian's stare met hers, weighted with grim certainty. I think he is a chaotic element, and chaos has no rules. A cold knot of dread cinched itself around Arya's ribs. This is madness. All I did was end things. This was never supposed to happen. I am aware, Adrian's voice softened infinitesimally, but you are in it now, and I will not allow him to harm you. Why? The question tore from her, sharper than she intended. Why is this so important to you? He didn't answer right away, just held her with that same intense, unreadable gaze. Then he gave his reason. Because you asked me to kiss you, and I agreed. That makes you my responsibility. I don't belong to you. Not yet. The atmosphere between them became charged, crackling with an energy she couldn't name. She felt a desperate need to move, to shatter the stillness. I'm getting some air, she declared. No, Adrian, you can't. Not until we have a clearer picture. She aimed a venomous glare at him. You cannot lock me in here. Watch me. They were frozen in a silent war of wills, an impasse broken only when Arya's phone buzzed once more. Both their gazes shot to the glowing screen. The same number, a new message. 1 month. That is your timeline. 1 month to return. After that, things become complicated. Adrian plucked the phone from her hand, his face a mask of cold rage. He's waging a psychological campaign. What kind of campaign? The kind with a very low survival rate. He locked his eyes on hers. I need you to trust me. I don't know you. Then get to know me, but trust me regardless. Every instinct in Arya screamed to fight, to assert her independence. But the simple, ugly truth was that she was terrified, and Adrian was the only shield between her and whatever twisted game Luca was playing. Fine, she breathed, her voice a mere whisper. For now you have it. Adrian gave a single sharp nod. That's enough. He handed back the phone and strode to the window, shoving his hands in his pockets. Arya watched his silhouette, a dark cipher she couldn't solve. Can I ask a question? She ventured. That depends on the question. Why were you really at that club? You said for the quiet, but that's obviously not true. You don't seem like a man who seeks out crowds. Adrian glanced over his shoulder, the corner of his mouth ticking up. I'm not. So why were you there? He turned to face her fully, leaning against the glass. I was there for a meeting, a business matter. What sort of business? The sort I don't discuss. That's very convenient. It is also the truth. Arya folded her arms. You're not planning on telling me anything, are you? Not right now. And why is that? Because your safety is directly inverse to what you know. That is an incredibly unsatisfying response. It is the only one you're getting. She burned to argue, to demand something more, but his expression was a final, unbreachable wall. Fine, she conceded. But if I am to be held captive here, I need work. I can't just sit and marinate in anxiety. A ghost of amusement touched Adrian's features. You have a job, don't you? What is it? Graphic design. I'm freelance. Then you will work from here. I need my equipment. My computer is at your apartment. I will send Marcus to collect it. And my files, my drawing tablet. Make a list. He will get everything. Arya shook her head, feeling a bizarre mix of annoyance and respect. You genuinely believe you have an answer for everything, don't you? It is not a belief. It is a fact. That sounds like arrogance. That sounds like experience. To her absolute shock, a small laugh escaped her. You're unbelievable. I am told that with some frequency. Adrian's phone vibrated. He checked the screen and his entire posture shifted. I need to take this. Help yourself to anything. The kitchen's full, there's wine, whatever you want. He was already gone from the room before a reply could form on her lips, his voice a low murmur down the hall. Arya stood in the deafening silence, profoundly alone once more, before heading to the guest room. She started unpacking, trying to force order onto the chaos storming in her mind. But the quiet of the apartment was suffocating. It was too large, too still, too deeply empty. She took out her phone, her thumb hovering above Luca's messages. They sat there like unspent cartridges. Reading them one last time, her stomach coiling into a tight knot, she began to type. I don't know what you think you're doing, but it is not going to work. Leave me alone. We are finished. Irrevocably. She hit send before her courage could desert her. The reply came almost instantly. You will think again. You always do. Arya's jaw tightened. Her defiance flew from her fingertips. Not this time. And if you continue, I am filing a restraining order. His response was immediate. Best of luck. You need to prove a credible threat, and all I've done is talk to you. A surge of helpless rage made her want to shatter the phone. Instead, she set it face up at the table, a silent threat, and walked to the immense window. The city glittered below, an uncaring sprawl of light. Somewhere out there, Luca was planning his next move, and she was completely in the dark. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. Adrian entered, his face etched with concern. Are you all right? No, but I'm managing. He gave a curt nod, accepting the answer. I'm ordering dinner. Do you have a preference? It doesn't matter, anything. Is Italian okay? Fine. He turned to leave, but stopped. Arya. Yes? You made the right choice, cutting him out. It doesn't feel like it. It will eventually. He left her, and Arya collapsed onto the bed, her eyes tracing the blank ceiling. She tried to will his words into truth, to imagine a future where Luca was nothing but a ghost, and her world was her own again. But some deep, rational part of her knew this was a delusion. Her circumstances were anything but standard. The man in the other room, whose kiss felt like a seismic shift, who'd sent a locksmith to her flat, and who now served her food with quiet command, was the very picture of unorthodox. The meal came inside the hour. Adrian set the food on a dining table built for 20, and a heavy, suffocating silence descended. Arya barely prodded her pasta, her hunger having evaporated entirely. Adrian ate methodically, his eyes scanning her at intervals. You need to eat, he said. It was an order, not a request. I'm not hungry. Eat anyway. Her fork hit the ceramic with a clatter. Is this your method for managing everyone? Only those who refuse to care for themselves. I can care for myself. Can you? The question struck with more weight than he likely intended. Arya looked away, her throat tightening. I used to think so. After a beat, Adrian replied, You still can. You just need time. Time for what? To remember who you are without him. A sharp heat stung the back of Arya's eyes. She blinked hard, refusing the tears. I thought I knew who I was. You do, he corrected. You are simply in the process of remembering. She looked at him then, truly seeing him, and found an unexpected quality in his gaze. It was understanding, not pity, but a silent, solid acknowledgement. "Thank you," she managed, her voice a bare whisper. Adrian gave a slight nod. "Finish your food." She obeyed, not because of hunger, but from the sudden clarity that he was right. She had a duty to her own survival. If that meant forcing down pasta she didn't want, then she would. After eating, Adrian vanished into his study while Arya retreated to the guest suite. She tried to work, opening her laptop, but her focus was fractured. Her heart leaped with every notification on her phone. Each noise in the building, every distant siren became a fresh surge of pure dread. Near 11, she gave up and readied herself for bed. She went through her nightly motions, pulled on a large t-shirt and slid under the covers. But sleep would not come. She lay staring into the darkness, her mind a storm of frantic thoughts. A quiet knock at the door made her jump. "Yes?" Adrian pushed it open. He was still dressed, though his jacket was off, sleeves rolled to his forearms. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "How could you tell?" "Your light's on." Arya pulled the blanket up to her chin. "I'm okay." "No, you're not, but that's all right." He came in, resting his entire body against the doorframe. "Want to talk about it?" "Talk about what?" "Whatever is keeping you awake." A tired, bitter laugh escaped her. "Where would I even start?" "Anywhere you like." Arya watched this man, who had upended her universe in under 48 hours, and felt a dangerous tremor inside her. "I keep hearing your words," she admitted, "about finding who I am without Luca. I don't think I ever knew. I was so busy being his perfect woman that I lost myself." Adrian's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "So find yourself now." "It's not that simple." "It is. You've just told yourself a different story." She shook her head. "You make it all sound so easy." "Because it often is. It's people who make it complicated." "And you, are you simple or complicated?" A slow, knowing smile touched Adrian's mouth. "I'm whatever the situation requires." Arya's heart beat faster. "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting tonight." He pushed off the doorframe to leave, but stopped. "Get some sleep, Arya. Tomorrow is going to be a very long day." "Why? What's happening tomorrow?" "We're going to handle the Luca problem permanently." Before she could even form a question, he was gone. Sleep was now a complete impossibility for Arya. For hours, she lay awake, Adrian's words echoing in her head. Handle the problem. Permanently. What did that mean? And why did the calm way he said it send a strange shiver through her? A feeling caught somewhere between terror and immense relief. As dawn began to light up the skyline, she gave up the pretense of sleep. She showered, dressed in jeans and a sweater, and padded barefoot to the kitchen. Adrian was already there, leaning on a counter, a mug in his hand, his phone in the other. He looked just as weary, but he wore his exhaustion like a custom-fit suit. Every detail was sharp, under his complete control. He looked up as she came in. "Morning. Morning." Arya went straight for the coffee, poured a cup, and leaned at the opposite counter. "Are you going to tell me what you meant last night?" "About what?" "About handling Luca permanently." Adrian put his phone down. "I meant exactly that." "That's not a good enough answer." "It is the only one you're getting for now." Arya's teeth ground together. "You know, I'm getting sick of you deciding what I'm allowed to know." "Then stop asking questions you aren't ready for the answers to." "And how would you know if I'm ready?" Adrian's eyes locked on hers, intense and unblinking. Because if I told you everything right now, you would leave, and I can't allow that. You can't allow me. She stopped, her mug hitting the counter hard enough to slosh coffee. You don't get to run my life, Adrian. I don't care about your new locks or your fancy guest rooms. I am not your problem to solve. You became my problem the moment you kissed me. That's not rational. That is the truth. They stood in a silent standoff, the tension in the air so thick it was almost a physical force. Arya's every nerve screamed at her to run, to get away, to do anything to break free, but a different, deeper part of her wondered if this was exactly where she was supposed to be. The sharp buzz of the intercom broke the spell. Adrian's face changed in an instant, becoming detached and all business. He hit the button. Yes? Garrett here, Mr. Moretti. I have the items from Miss Bennet's apartment. Adrian buzzed him in, then his eyes snapped back to Arya. Your laptop and your files. I had him pick them up this morning. She was speechless. You did what? You said you needed them, so I sent him. Arya's jaw went slack. How was a person supposed to react to that? Thank you for breaking into my apartment. Or maybe, stop trying to run my life? Before she could choose a response, there was a knock. Adrian opened the door to a man in his 40s, with salt and pepper hair and worn hands, holding a large box. Morning, sir. It's all in here. Laptop, tablet, the hard drive, and the desk lamp. You took my lump? Garrett's eyes flickered from her to Adrian, his expression a blank slate of confusion. You said to get anything she might need. I did. Adrian took the box, setting it on the counter with a thud. Thank you, Garrett. Anything to report? The place was clean, no sign of entry, nobody was watching. But a shadow of doubt crossed Garrett's face, his gaze shifting between them. There was a car across the street, though, a black sedan, tinted windows. Sat there the entire time I was inside. A muscle spasmed in Adrian's jaw. Plates? Got them. Garrett pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and offered it. Already ran them, registered to a rental agency, corporate account. The name? Vance Industries. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Arya felt her stomach clench. Vance Industries was Luca's family business. Adrian betrayed no surprise, just gave a slow nod as if confirming something he already knew. Anything else? Driver was a big guy, short hair, looked like ex-military. He never moved, didn't even twitch, just sat there watching. I need a picture. Garrett shook his head. Windows were too dark, but I got the make and model. I'll send you the info. Adrian passed him a thick fold of cash. Good work. Keep an eye on her building. If anyone starts asking questions, I need to know immediately. Got it. Garrett nodded to Arya. Ma'am. Then he was gone. Arya stood frozen, her fingers digging into the counter as she tried to process the news. He has my place under surveillance. Yes. Why would he do that? Because he's a psychopath who can't let you go. But why? We were only together for 8 months. It wasn't like we were getting married or... Her voice trailed off, her breath catching. You think this is about more than just a breakup? Adrian's gaze was sharp, drilling into hers. I'm positive. How? Because men like Luca don't put their ex-girlfriends under watch. They do that when they're protecting an asset. War trying to get one back. I don't have anything he could possibly want. Are you absolutely sure about that? For the first time, Arya truly thought about it. She scoured her memory, replaying the past 8 months, seeking a single clue to explain this madness. A freelance designer had no fortune, no powerful friends, nothing of any real value, until one awful realization struck her. "Oh, God," she breathed. Adrian's gaze sharpened. "What?" 3 months back, Luca paid me for marketing materials for Vance Industries. Brochures, presentations, a full rebrand. I did it for free. He said it was for some new import-export company they were starting. "Do you have copies?" "Of course, I back up all my work. It's on my external drive." Adrian moved with breathtaking speed. He ripped open the box from Garrett, found the hard drive, and plugged it into his laptop. His fingers flew across the keyboard, tearing through files, his eyes scanning with a focus that made Arya's own heart pound. "This," he said, his voice low, "this isn't marketing material." Arya drew closer, looking over his shoulder at the screen. At first glance, the documents looked completely ordinary. Polished designs, corporate jargon, stock photos of shipping yards and containers. But Adrian zoomed in on a tiny corner of a single picture. It showed a cargo manifest. The numbers listed on it were different from the figures in the main document. "What am I looking at?" she asked. "Hidden data encrypted right into the image file." Adrian pulled up another file, running it through a program that flooded the monitor with lines of code. "You weren't just designing pamphlets, Arya, you were building a cover." The full weight of it hit her then. "Anyone with these files has evidence of every illegal shipment Vance Industries has made for the last 6 months. A chill washed through her. Evidence of what? Adrian kept working, his fingers probing deeper into the data. Finally, he sat back and met her eyes. Money laundering, weapons trafficking, and probably worse. He took a breath. "Your ex-boyfriend isn't just a rich kid, Arya. He's running a criminal syndicate, and you have all the proof on that drive." The strength fled from Arya's legs. Her fingers dig into the leather of Adrian's chair, her only anchor. "That's impossible. Luca is a narcissist, yes, but he's no criminal." "Then explain the surveillance, the threatening texts. Explain his desperation to get you back, a desperation that would make him risk everything." The silence was her only answer, each piece of the puzzle slotted into a ruinous, undeniable picture. "He used me." The admission tasted like ash. "He knew I would back up the files. He counted on it. The moment I walked away, you became a loose end." Arya sank into the opposite chair, her world fragmenting. "What do I do?" "You do nothing. I'm handling it." "How?" With a sharp click, Adrian shut the laptop, his face turning to stone. "By making it perfectly clear to Luca that you are untouchable now and forever." "And how will you do that?" "The way I handle all threats, quietly and permanently." That word again, permanent. Only now she grasped its terrible weight. "Well, you're going to kill him." Adrian's gaze, like chips of ice, met hers. "No, I am going to erase him. There's a difference. Not one that matters much." "It is, when it is the only one that matters." He stood, his entire body a tightly wound spring. "Luca is insulated. His family has wealth, connections, an army of lawyers. A body on a slab creates a media circus. But if he simply evaporates from public life, disappears overseas, takes a plea, gets buried in litigation, no one looks any deeper. They just move on." Arya watched him, her mind reeling. "What are you?" A ghost of a smile haunted his lips. "I'm the man who solves impossible problems." That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. She wanted to demand more, to break through the facade, but his eyes were a steel door. Not now, maybe not ever. Her phone buzzed against the table. She picked it up. The blood froze in her veins. A blocked number. I know he's there, and I know you have it. Give it back and we can talk. Keep it, and I'll make you wish you never met him. Arya's hand shook as she held the screen out to Adrian. His jaw tightened as he read, setting the phone down with the terrifying stillness. He's getting bold, Adrian remarked, his voice low. Faster than I expected. What does that mean? It means our timeline just collapsed. He pulled out his own phone, dialing. I need to sit down. Tonight. No, I don't care about your schedule. Make it happen. He ended the call, his focus snapping back to Arya. Pack a bag. Why? Where are we going? Somewhere Luca can't touch you. Somewhere he would never think to look. Adrian, trust me. Cornered with no other options and this dangerous man as her only shield, she finally gave in. Okay, I trust you. For an instant, something in Adrian's expression softened before the mask slammed back into place. Good. You have 1 hour. He was already walking away deep into another call, his voice a sharp, quiet weapon. Arya stood alone in the cavernous kitchen, trying to process how her life had spun into chaos in less than 72 hours. In her room, she packed a few things into a bag, then just sat, staring at her phone. On her screen, Luca's words lingered like glowing embers poised to ignite. A primal urge screamed at her to erase them, to block his number and pretend he was a ghost. Yet Adrian's warning was a cold whisper in her ear. Evidence, leverage. He owned this part of her. Deleting them was not an option. Not now. An hour passed. Marcus stood sentinel by the car. Adrian appeared, no longer in a suit, but in dark jeans and a black jacket that made him seem more like a shadow than a man. He took Arya's bag without a sound and led her from the building. The ride unfolded in a sheath of absolute silence. Arya watched the city's lights bleed into streaks of color, the familiar streets dissolving into alien highways until a bridge carried them over the water, leaving Manhattan a distant, fading memory. She posed no questions about where they were going or for how long. She just sat, hollowed out and numb, refusing to let her mind drift to what waited in the dark ahead. After more than an hour, the urban glow surrendered to a dense forest, and Marcus guided the car down a narrow path cutting through the trees. They stopped before a house that was less a home and more a bastion, walled in by high fences, iron gates, and the unblinking eyes of security cameras. The gates parted for them without a sound. The house was a monument of stone and glass, a severe, imposing structure torn from the pages of an architectural magazine. When Arya stepped out of the car, her breath plumed in the frigid air as she stared. Where is this place? Adrian's voice was a low murmur. Upstate, one of my safe houses. He told her its location was a secret held by only his most trusted allies. And how large is that circle? Only 3, he replied, and now you are one of them. Inside, a stark foyer opened into a living area where floor-to-ceiling windows framed a lake, its surface a black mirror reflecting the moon. The kitchen is stocked, Adrian said. Bedrooms are upstairs. Choose one. I'll be in the office. Adrian, don't go. He stopped, turning back to her. How long are we staying here? The answer he gave her was colder than the night air. For as long as it takes. Takes for what? For me to end this. And with that, he vanished. leaving Arya to be swallowed by the crushing silence of the vast home, the true weight of her reality finally descending. She was in exile, hidden away from the world. Her very life was now collateral, held by a man she barely knew, the final desperate play in a game she was about to lose. Here she remained, a prisoner in a magnificent cage, awaiting an outcome from a stranger in a war she didn't understand. She pressed her forehead against the chilled glass, her breath a fleeting ghost on the pane. Outside, Luca was plotting his next move. Inside, Adrian was crafting his counterattack. She was the axis on which both their worlds now turned, and it was impossible to know which of them posed the greater danger. The hours dissolved, becoming a shapeless, fluid thing. Sleep provided no refuge. The thought of food was repulsive. Just before midnight, she surrendered and went to find Adrian. He was in a study down the hall, the room lit only by the cold, sterile glow of his monitors, a terrain of scattered files covering every surface. He spoke without looking up from the screen. "Can't sleep." "Yes, welcome to the club." Arya drifted closer, her eyes drawn to the screens, a fractured collage of financial records, photographs, and live surveillance feeds. From the digital chaos, Luca's face materialized, flanked by men she'd never seen, their expressions like granite, their eyes hollow and dead. "Who are they?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Luca's partners, the men he answers to. They're the ones who will hunt you to the ends of the earth if this goes wrong." A knot of pure ice formed in her gut. "And you're going to stop them?" "I'm preparing an offer that they will find impossible to refuse." "What kind of offer?" Adrian finally looked up, his eyes locking with hers. "I'm giving them Luca. In exchange, you walk away clean." The air rushed from Arya's lungs. "You're just gonna throw him to them?" "I'm giving them exactly what they want, the data drive and the idiot who lost it." "Luca," she mouthed. "Luca!" She sank into the chair across from his desk. "He'll never agree to that." "He won't be given a choice." "But why would you do this for me?" The question escaped her, raw and unguarded. "You could have just walked away. You could have let this happen to me." "But I didn't." "Why?" A deep, heavy silence hung between them, pregnant with everything left unsaid. He shut the laptop. For the first time, his undivided attention was on her, his gaze so intense it felt as though it was excavating her soul. "Because when you kissed me," he began, his voice a low timbre that vibrated through her. "It wasn't an act. You felt something even if you refused to admit it. And that truth has been a splinter in my mind ever since." Arya's heart seized. "Adrian." "I am not a good man, Arya. I have done things that would make you sick. My world is built on leverage and violence. But when you came to me in that club, asking for a sanctuary, something inside of me broke. And now, walking away is no longer possible." She had no words, no defense against a confession delivered with such brutal honesty. So she answered him in the only way she knew how. She leaned over the desk and met his lips with her own. This was not like before. It was slow and deep, not a strategy or a test. It was just the two of them, two broken people finding a single, honest moment in the dark. When they finally broke apart, his hand was in her hair, his forehead resting against hers. "This is a bad idea," he murmured. "Probably. You're going to regret this." "Maybe." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Then we'd better make it worth regretting." He kissed her again, but this time with a fire that burned away all thoughts of Luca, the danger, the files, everything but him, everything but the way he held her, as if she was the single most precious thing in his entire world. When they finally surfaced for air, he pulled back, his expression turning serious. "Go get some sleep, Arya. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." "What happens tomorrow?" "I have a meeting with Luca's partners, and I'm going to end this for good." Arya wanted to argue, to scream that this was her life he was bargaining with, but the conviction in his eyes told her it was a fight she couldn't win, so she just nodded and turned for the door. Right before she left, she glanced back. "Adrian, yes, just try to stay alive." One corner of his mouth curved up. "I'll do my best." She left him there, the solitary general bathed in the blue light of his screens, and went upstairs. She lay on the bed, fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, Adrian was walking into a lion's den. Tomorrow, a deal would be made that would either set her free or sign her death warrant. Tomorrow would change the entire game. But tonight, all she could think about was his kiss, about how for a moment it had made her feel like she mattered, like she was worth the risk. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, a tiny spark of hope flickered to life inside her. The morning came too soon, bringing with it a strange, pale light and the smell of coffee. She found Adrian in the kitchen, already wearing a dark suit that made him look like a harbinger of death. He glanced up as she entered. "Did you get any sleep?" "A little," she lied. "You?" "Enough." She poured a coffee, her hand shaking almost imperceptibly. "So, what's the plan?" "I meet them at 2:00. Neutral territory. I give them the files. They give you your freedom." "And Luca?" "They'll handle him. He's become a problem they're no longer willing to have." A sickening wave rolled through Arya's stomach. "You're sending him to be executed." "I'm sending him to face the outcome he created," he corrected her. "What happens after that is not my problem." "How can you be so cold about this?" Adrian set his cup down, his eyes locked on hers. "Because the second I lose my calm, people get hurt, and I am doing everything in my power to make sure you aren't one of them." His words hit her with the force of a physical blow. Her own mug clattered on the countertop. "I don't want you getting hurt because of me." "I won't be." "You can't know that. Watch me." They stood in the charged quiet, a world of unspoken things passing between them. At last, Adrian closed the distance, his hands coming up to cup her face. "I'm going to fix this," he whispered. "And when I'm done, you get your life back. No more threats, no more being watched, no more psycho ex-boyfriends. You'll be free." He added, "To live however you want." "And you?" she asked. His thumb stroked her cheek. "What about me? Will I see you in that life?" For a single heartbeat, his entire composure fractured, a crack in the armor that he sealed as quickly as it appeared. "Is that what you want?" he asked, and Arya's answer was a breath. "Yes." He kissed her then, deep and long, a vow hanging in the balance. When he pulled away, his face was all business, severe and focused. "Then I'm yours," she replied, "for as long as you'll have me." "That could be a very long time, he said. "Good." He took a step back, straightening his jacket as he drew his phone. "Stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone. Marcus is on the grounds if you need anything." "Adrian, I'll be back by sundown." And then he was gone. Arya was left in the echoing silence, her only companions a chilling fear and the ghost of his kiss on her lips. Time began to crawl, She tried to work to force a distraction, but her mind was with Adrian in some dangerous, unknown meeting. She paced, she watched the clock tick, she tracked the sun's slow descent. At 3:30, her phone buzzed, a number she didn't know. Her heart stopped. He can't protect you, he's wrong. By nightfall, you'll remember where you belong. You'll be back. They always come back. Her hand trembled as she dialed Adrian. Voicemail. She tried him again, straight to voicemail. A cold panic seized her lungs. She ran to the window, scanning for Marcus, for his car, for any sign of her guardian. The long driveway was completely empty. A new text message lit up the screen. "Stop calling him, he's busy." Another followed. "Don't worry, Arya, I'm coming to see you myself. Very soon." In that exact moment, the power died. Every light went out. The house was plunged into a thick, suffocating darkness. Arya's breath hitched in her throat. Fumbling for her phone's flashlight, she backed away toward the stairs. Then she heard it. A noise from downstairs. The deliberate groan of a single floorboard. Someone was in the house. The phone slipped from her grasp, the clatter on the hardwood floor like a gunshot. She froze, every nerve on fire, listening. Another creak, closer now, slower, more deliberate. He wasn't hiding anymore. She snatched her phone, killed the light, and moved like a shadow toward the bedroom. Her mind raced through a storm of options. Barricade the door, hide, call the police. But she was lost, with no idea where she was, and Adrian was gone. The heavy footfalls reached the bottom of the stairs. Arya slipped into the bedroom, easing the door shut with a soft click, her shaking fingers fumbling with the lock. It was a decorative thing, a flimsy piece of brass that wouldn't stop a determined push. She backed away toward the window, the frantic drumming of her own heart drowning out all other sound. Outside, the lake was a sheet of black ink. The drop was too far. There was no escape. A text lit up her screen. "Really, Arya, let's not be children." She stood motionless, pinned by terror, pressing herself into the wall beside the window as she tried to think. The footsteps stopped right outside her door. Then a knock. 3 hard, sharp raps that vibrated through her bones. "I know you're in there." Luca's voice seeped through the wood, impossibly calm, almost friendly. "This little game is getting old. Open the door." Arya's throat closed, stealing her voice. "Fine." He sighed from the other side. "We'll do it your way." The door didn't give way. It exploded inward, the lock vaporizing as splinters of wood shot across the room. Luca walked through the ruined frame as if he owned the place. He was different. The handsome, polished mask was still there, but something truly unhinged now lived behind his eyes. They were wild, disconnected from sanity. "There you are," he crooned. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Arya's back hit the cold glass of the window. "How did you find me?" "I told you, I know everything." He glided closer, his movements deceptively relaxed, a pleasant smile on his face. "Did you really think Adrian could hide you from me?" "I've been watching him for weeks. Every asset, every safe house, every little secret he thinks he has." A small smile played on his lips. "He's smart, I'll give him that. But I'm smarter. Get out!" "I will, with you." "Never." Luca's smile evaporated. "Don't make this difficult, Arya. I'm just here to put you back where you belong, to fix the mess you made." "I didn't make a mess, you did." "By tricking me, by making a fool out of me." "Making a fool out of you?" A brittle laugh burst from his lips. "I gave you the world." The best restaurants, the right people, a place by my side. And this is how you repay me? By stealing from me? I stole nothing. You paid me for those designs. I did the job. And you kept copies. Why? Because I keep an archive of my work. It's standard practice. Luca's jaw tightened into a knot. Those files don't belong to you. They belong to me. And you are going to give them back. No. He covered the distance between them in 2 impossibly fast strides, his hand clamping around her arm with a bruising force. This isn't a discussion. Arya struggled against his iron grip. Let go of me. Not until you tell me where they are. I don't have them. Adrian does. Something shifted in Luca's eyes. Pure rage, but underneath it, a flicker of something like fear. We'll go get them from him. Together. He'll kill you. No, he won't. Because you're going to call him and tell him it's over. Admit you made a terrible mistake. Tell him you want to come back to me. That's insane. Luca pulled her closer, his face just inches from hers. Do it. Now. Or I will make certain Adrian never leaves that meeting alive. A deep, paralyzing cold spread through Arya's body. What did you do? What was necessary? I told you, Arya, I know everything. I know where he is right now. I know who he's with. And I know how to make sure he never walks out of that room. You're bluffing. Am I? He took out his phone and showed her the screen. A live feed. Adrian was at a table in a warehouse, surrounded by men in dark suits. It only takes one phone call, one signal, and a bullet will enter his skull. Arya felt the world tilt. No, please. Then do as I say. Call him. Tell him to give me what's mine. Her hands shook so badly she could hardly hold her own phone. She found Adrian's contact. Her gaze locked on the name as her mind splintered into panic. To make the call was to spring the trap. Refusing meant Luca would have him killed anyway. She touched the screen. 1 ring, then 2. Arya! Adrian's tone was coiled steel. Report! Her words shattered. She tried again. Luca's here. He found me. He has me. A beat of silence, then his voice, low and lethal. Put him on. With a cruel smirk, Luca ripped the phone from her hand. Adrian, a pleasure to finally speak to you directly. Touch her, and I'll bury you so deep your own ghost won't find the way out. Brave, for a man surrounded by my people, all waiting for an excuse to put you down. Luca glanced at his own phone's video feed. The Pier 7 warehouse, meeting the Volkovs. A bold move, I'll grant you. Idiotic, but bold. What do you want, Luca? What's mine? The designs, the drive, everything Arya took. She took nothing. You handed it to her. A matter of perspective. I want it back, and I want you out of her life, out of this picture entirely. Adrian's laugh was the sound of ice cracking. That isn't going to happen. Then it seems we are at an impasse. I'm not leaving here without her, and you're not leaving that warehouse alive without my say-so. You actually think the Volkovs work for you? You're a greater fool than I gave you credit for. The first crack appeared in Luca's confident veneer. What are you saying? I'm saying this has all been a charade for the last 3 days. You think I walked into this blind? I have leverage you don't even know exists. Make that call, and you'll learn just how completely you've been played. You're bluffing. Try me. Luca's knuckles whitened around the phone. Arya saw the frantic gears turning behind his eyes, the first hint of doubt poisoning his certainty. His gaze flickered from the video feed back to her. Fine. he finally said. New deal. I get Arya, you keep the files, and we walk away. No. She's not a bargaining chip. She doesn't belong to you. And if you think for 1 second I'm letting you leave with her, you've lost your damn mind. Pure rage twisted Luca's features. Then what's your move, Adrian? Because from where I'm standing, you don't have one. My move is simple. You let her go. You walk out of here. And maybe, if I'm feeling generous, I won't tell the Volkovs about the money you've been skimming from their shipments for the past 6 months. The blood drained from Luca's face. How could you? Like I said, I came prepared, and you just confessed. Luca's jaw was clenched so tight it looked like it might crack. He shoved the phone back at Arya, his own hand shaking with raw fury. This isn't over. Oh, Arya said, her voice quiet. It is. He grabbed her arm again, his grip even more brutal, and started hauling her toward the shattered doorway. We're leaving. Now. Arya fought back, her feet scraping uselessly against the concrete as he overpowered her. Let me go. Quiet. They were halfway down the stairs when the main door exploded inward. Adrian stood framed in the entrance, jacket gone, shirt open, a pistol held with an unwavering, expert grip. His face was calm, almost serene, but his eyes were an inferno. Let her go, Luca! Luca froze, yanking Arya in front of him like a human shield. A shot from there goes straight through her. I don't miss. Are you willing to bet your life on that? Adrian's gaze burned into Arya's, forging a connection. In it, she saw no fear, only a terrifying, calm certainty that stole her breath. Arya? His voice was a low command. Drop. Instinct eclipsed reason. Her knees buckled, her body becoming a dead weight that shattered Luca's balance. He stumbled, his grip loosening for a fatal instant, all the time Adrian needed. A single clean shot cracked the air. Luca screamed, grabbing a ruined shoulder as Arya scrambled away, hitting the floor hard. In a blur, Adrian was on them, kicking the dropped gun aside and pressing his own to Luca's temple. I warned you, Adrian said, his voice like frost. You don't touch her. On the ground, blood blooming between his fingers, Luca's face was a canvas of disbelief. You shot me. You actually shot me. Be grateful that's all I did. Adrian's eyes found Arya. Are you hurt? She could only shake her head, her breath coming in ragged bursts. Yes, I'm okay. Good. His gaze snapped back to Luca. Here's what happens now. You will tell me everything. Who you work for, where the shipments go, every name on your books. If I think you're lying, the next bullet goes somewhere vital. I'm not telling you anything. Adrian cocked the hammer. Wrong answer. Wait. Luca's voice broke. Wait, all right, I'll talk. Just don't. The door flew open again. 3 men in black tactical gear flooded the room, rifles up. Arya's heart stopped, but Adrian didn't flinch, just let out a slow breath. You're late. One of the operators lowered his weapon. Sorry, boss. Traffic was murder. Boss? Arya whispered, watching as the armed team swarmed Luca, hauling him to his feet and cuffing him. He was still bleeding, his face pale, all the fight gone from him. What is this? Luca managed weakly. Who are they? Adrian holstered his weapon and turned to Arya, the hardness in his face finally melting. Private security, he said. They work for me. You! The words caught in her throat. This was all your plan. As I said, he replied, I've been planning this for the last 3 days. But the Volkovs, the meeting, she stammered. I only told him I was seeing his people, not cutting a deal. But Adrian just nodded to his men. Take him to the holding site. I'll deal with him there. As they dragged Luca away, he shot a look of pure poison at Arya. "This isn't over, Arya, you hear me? It's not." A sharp jab from a guard cut him off. The door slammed, leaving an echoing silence. Arya felt unsteady, trembling from the raw violence. Adrian pulled her into his arms, and she collapsed against him, her body shaking with sobs. "It's over," he murmured. "He's gone. He can't hurt you anymore. You shot him." "I did. He could have died. He could have. But I knew you wouldn't want that on your conscience." She pulled back, looking up into his eyes. "How did you know I would drop?" "I didn't. I just had faith." "That's insane." "That's us." A wild, relieved laugh escaped Arya. "Who are you, Adrian?" He cupped her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't felt fall. "I'm the man who cleans up messes but can't walk away from the people who count." "I count more than you could ever know." He kissed her then, a deep, possessive kiss, and she melted into the fiercely protective man who had just burned down his world to keep her safe. He broke away, resting his forehead against hers. "Let's go. We need to move." "Where are we going?" "Somewhere Luca can never reach you. Somewhere completely safe." "Safer than this place?" "Much safer." He led her out to a waiting car where Marcus stood. The older man's face was stone, but his eyes were filled with worry. "Is it done, sir?" "It will be. Take us to the city house." "Yes, sir." They drove in silence, Arya leaning against Adrian, his arm a solid grounding weight. She should feel broken, shattered, but instead a strange, deep calm settled over her. "What will happen to him?" she asked quietly. "Luca? He's about to have a very long conversation. After that, he disappears. You're just going to make him vanish? He gets a choice. Cooperate and get a new life somewhere far away, or face the people he double-crossed. Most men in his position choose to cooperate. And if he doesn't," Adrian's arm tightened around her, "then he doesn't. But either way, he is out of your life for good." Arya closed her eyes. "I feel like I should be guilty about this, but I'm not." "That's because you're finally seeing him for who he is, not who you wanted him to be." "And what's that?" "A coward who used you, tried to control you, and thought he owned you." Adrian's voice dropped. "You're worth more than that." "Do I?" He glanced down, his expression completely serious. "Yes, you do." They pulled up to a different building, an anonymous glass tower in the heart of Manhattan. Adrian escorted her past a doorman's silent nod and into a keycard-activated elevator. The penthouse they walked into was nothing like his other place. This one felt lived in, warm. Books filled the shelves, a coat was thrown over a chair, a coffee cup sat by the sink. "This is your real home," Arya said. "It is." "Then why did you bring me here?" "The other place is for business. This is for me. I needed you to be somewhere completely safe." Arya went to the window, staring out at the endless grid of city lights. She could hear Adrian on the phone behind her, his voice low and sharp as he gave orders, managing the situation. When he hung up, he came to stand beside her. They stood for a moment in silence, watching the city breathe. "What happens now?" Arya whispered. "Now you get some rest. Tomorrow we figure out your next move. And after that?" Adrian turned to face her. "After that, you get your life back. Your apartment, your work, your independence, all of it." "And you, am I allowed to have you too?" A small smile graced his lips. "Do you want to have me?" "I asked you that this morning. You never really gave me an answer." I said I was yours for as long as you wanted me. What if I want that to be for a very long time? For a second, Adrian's control slipped, and a raw vulnerability showed in his eyes. Then I guess I'm yours, for as long as you'll have me. Arya lifted her hand, her palm resting against his jaw. That could be a very long time, Adrian. Good. He kissed her, not with the fire of before, but with the quiet promise of two people alone, the danger past, and something fragile and new starting to grow. Later, Adrian showed her to a guest room. Get some sleep, real sleep. My room is just down the hall. Adrian? Yes? Thank you for all of it. He gave a small nod. Always. He started to leave, but Arya's hand shot out and grabbed his. Stay! Please don't leave me alone. Adrian paused, his eyes meeting hers. Arya, I can't do this by myself tonight. Please. He paused for a heartbeat, then nodded, slipped off his shoes, and stretched out on the bed. Arya moved against him, her head finding his chest as his arm wrapped around her. You're safe now, he whispered into her hair. I promise. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Arya believed it. She woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee. For a brief moment she was lost, unsure where she was or what had happened. Then it all came flooding back. Luca, the gun, Adrian's cold, precise rage. She sat up, her body aching, and saw that Adrian's side of the bed was empty but still warm. She found him in the kitchen, already dressed in another perfect suit, phone held to his ear. I don't care about his terms. He plays by our rules, or he gets nothing. That's the choice. A short pause. Good. Keep me updated. He ended the call and saw her. The hard look on his face softened instantly. Good morning. Did you sleep? Better than I thought I would. Was that? Luca. He's decided to be helpful. A knot of anxiety tightened in Arya's stomach. What's he giving you? Everything. Names, shipping routes, bank accounts. Enough to burn his entire operation to the ground. And what happens to him? Adrian poured her a cup of coffee. He gets a new name and a new life somewhere very far away. He'll just be gone. He'll just be gone. Arya took a sip, her mind struggling with the absolute finality of it. It's really over. It's really over. She set her cup down on the counter, her hands not quite steady. I don't know what to do now. For 3 days, my entire life has just been about running and hiding. Now, it's done. I don't know how to take that in. Adrian came around the island and put his hands on her shoulders. You take it one day at a time. You go back to your apartment, back to your work, you begin again. But what if I don't want to go back? Then don't. You can do whatever you want, Arya. That's the whole point. You're free. She looked up at him. And you? What are you going to do? Me? A faint smirk touched his lips. I'll go back to what I always do. Fixing problems, running my world. And what of us? What is our fate? Silence hangs between them as his eyes search hers. What do you want us to be? Arya's reply is immediate, a single breath. Something real. No more calculated games, no more masks, just us. Adrian's grip on her shoulders intensifies. Then we are real, without rules, without conditions, only you and me. Is that the truth? I never give voice to a lie. A genuine smile, the first she's felt in days, transforms Arya's expression. All right, then we are real. He pulls her into him, and she yields to his strength, his sanctuary, and the staggering, beautiful truth that she walked into a club 3 days prior, seeking vengeance and found something sacred. So, What happens now? She whispers into his chest. Now, Adrian breathes. We build our own world together. I'm quite sure normal isn't a word you use. Then we'll invent a new meaning for it. Arya pulls back, her gaze meeting his. I think I'd like that. Good, because you are not escaping me. Is that a promise? Adrian's eyes burn with intensity. A vow. His kiss was a deliberate seal, a profound contract signed between them. Arya knew then that whatever came next, whatever chaos his life bled into hers, they would face it as one, and that perhaps was the only truth that mattered. 3 weeks passed before Arya's lungs remembered how to breathe evenly. 3 weeks of waking in Adrian's world, of coffee shared during his Empire's calls, of learning the rhythm of his existence and her place within it. She had revisited her apartment on the 4th day, Marcus standing guard as Adrian demanded. The rooms felt foreign, a stage set for a life she had already outgrown. She took only what was vital and walked away for the last time. Her clients never questioned her change of venue. They wanted her art, and she delivered. Working late at Adrian's table as he commanded his own kingdom from the other side, she never asked about his world, knowing a closer look would shatter the fragile peace of her own. She was not yet strong enough for that kind of demolition. Then, after 3.5 weeks of Luca's absence, Adrian came into the kitchen, sliding a thick manila envelope across the table to her. What is this? She asked. He answered, The end. Arya's eyes lifted from the package to his face, demanding more than his 2-word epitaph. Adrian simply poured her coffee, his movements practiced and calm. He told her Luca was gone, exiled to South America with a new name and enough wealth to start again. The Volkovs had received everything they demanded, the proof, the contacts, the entire infrastructure needed to obliterate his network. And for her, he nodded at the envelope. You are now untouchable. Arya opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a collection of legal documents she couldn't fully decipher, but their purpose was clear: covenants of protection, absolute immunity, a paper trail painting her as an unsuspecting pawn caught in a war, not a combatant. How did you manage this? She breathed. He said, I have connections. I called in markers. Just like that, Luca was erased with no path back. The Volkovs would ensure it. She had expected a tidal wave of relief, and it came, mostly. But just beneath it, a toxic sliver of guilt began to lodge itself in her soul. Are you okay? Adrian's voice was low. I don't know, she admitted. This is what I wanted, wasn't it? But a man's entire existence had been unmade for her. No, it was for him, Adrian corrected. His choices brought him here. You were only the catalyst. The logic was a cold comfort. He put down his mug, his hand coming to rest on her shoulder. Let me be clear. Men like Luca don't change. They just wear better masks. If it wasn't you, it would have been someone else. His end was written long ago. You didn't ruin his life, Arya. You just forced the sun to rise. She wanted to believe him, to let the crushing weight of it all go, but the feelings stayed. A frozen stone inside her chest. Her quiet admission finally breaks the stillness. She needs a guide, a professional to help chart the ruin inside her own head. Adrian's reaction is instinctual, a swift promise of a discreet arrangement. His ability to procure a therapist is framed not as a favor, but as a simple transaction within his sprawling network. When she points this out, a ghost of a smile touches her lips despite her pain. He offers a placating gesture, a soft kiss on her forehead, a promise of safety he has no authority to grant. She calls out his arrogance, highlighting the folly in trying to command the uncontrollable. He counters with his perfect record of success. Arya's gaze lands on the core paradox of her life. The very man who set her world on fire has become her only shelter, but her demand for his own vulnerability shatters the ceasefire. His emotional armor slams into place, a mask of indifference she will no longer tolerate. She states the new terms of their treaty. Without emotional parity, they cannot survive. A charged silence stretches between them, thick with unspoken words until he yields a sliver of ground. The tension in his jawline speaks of a war waged within before a ragged breath tears from him. He admits to a profound dislocation, a mind fractured over 3 weeks of raising a criminal empire, bargaining with brutal men, and enduring sleepless vigils haunted by thoughts of her. The verdict is blunt. He is unraveling, but he believes it a fleeting condition. The confession pierces Arya a swift, sympathetic ache. She closes the space, her hands finding the hard plane of his chest, an offering not of answers, but of presence. He tries to erect a wall, to cast his world as a place she cannot survive. She tears it down by choosing him and with him his grim reality. His hands find her face, a tender cage of his touch, as he insists this life would tarnish her. She denies it, claiming her decision with unwavering force. The kiss that follows is a slow, deliberate sealing of a pact, a moment crystallizing, not a transient desire, but an unbreakable fealty. They break apart, his forehead coming to rest against hers in the silent, heavy air. A summons to Chicago arises, a business necessity spanning several days, and he declares she will join him. The city's name hangs in the atmosphere, weighted with things unsaid. He frames the journey as an affair he must conclude in person, secure, a sequence of meetings. But his true motive is her nearness. She counters with an assertion of her own resilience, a fact he concedes before dismissing it with a plea to humor him. A study of his face, the rigid line of his jaw, the strain carved around his eyes, unveils the truth. This is the fallout from Luca's betrayal, a vacuum of power an old lieutenant now seeks to claim. He must extinguish this spark of ambition before it ignites. She questions her part in this theater. His answer is twofold. He trusts no one else with her life, and he selfishly cannot bear a 3-day absence. A complicated warmth unfurls in her chest at this stark admission. The question evolves from if to when. The departure is set for the morning. Their northbound travel is wrapped in a profound quietude. Adrian is lost to his laptop, his concentration a fortress. Arya's novel rests unopened, her thoughts a tempest of Luca, the damning envelope, and a life now irrevocably foreign. They reach the city's heart at noon, heading straight to a hotel of obscene opulence, where a single night's lodging cost more than her entire former weekly salary. Adrian checked them in under a false name before they were spirited to a suite on the 40th floor. He told her to make herself at home, his focus already captured by the screen of his phone. His meeting was at 3. He would return by 6. Her appeal to accompany him was met with an unequivocal rejection. These were not, he stated, social calls. Frustration began to coil inside her at the prospect of hours spent in gilded confinement. He offered a catalog of solitary pursuits, exploring shopping, ordering from the room's menu. His only stipulations that she stay in public and keep her phone on. As she started to argue, his voice altered. A taut, almost pleading note within it forced her to yield. She consented, but with a single term. complete honesty upon his return. He sealed their agreement with a brief, searing kiss and was gone, leaving Arya alone in the echoing suite, thrumming with a nervous current that had nowhere to go. She drifted through the urban landscape like an apparition, following the river's winding course, her eyes skimming over window displays of a life she no longer recognized. Just a month ago, her world had a defined shape, tethered to a man she thought she knew. Now she was an exile in Chicago with a cipher, running from faceless threats, trying to build something true upon a foundation of lies. The notion should have been paralyzing, and moments of terror did strike. Yet the overwhelming feeling was one of returning to a place she belonged. She was back in the hotel by 5:30. The room service pasta cooled on the table as she worked on a glass of wine that gave no comfort. Adrian returned, looking not just fatigued but stripped down to his very essence. Her quiet question about his day was met by the exhausted slump of a man just returned from a war with no name. The matter, he said, was contained. The ambiguity was a shield. He poured a whiskey and drank it like a prescription. The associate had for the moment stepped back. That caveat hung in the air. This truce, he explained, was merely an intermission in a conflict far from over. Arya lowered her glass, her voice firm, demanding to know what he was concealing. He stared into his amber liquid, lost in a long, crushing silence. When his words finally came, they were hushed, painting a picture of a far larger war. Luca, he revealed, was never the one at the top. More powerful men exist in the periphery, beings with deeper pockets and longer reach, and they are angered by the recent shift in power. She posed the vital question, were they in danger? The most immediate peril, he assured her, was neutralized, but the board remained complex. She refused the half-truth, demanding clarity. If this was to be their war, she had to understand the enemy. His eyes met hers, clear of any subterfuge. He gave her the unvarnished truth. 3 different organizations wanted what was on that drive. The Volkovs held a piece, but the complete data was the only card they had left to play. The sole reason she was still breathing was that they all knew he held that card and understood his silent promise to burn their worlds to ash if they touched her. A frigid dread coiled through Arya's body. They were not safe. Not in any sense of the word. He argued that their current position was the only kind of safety that exists in his world, a standoff born of mutual threat. And in this realm, he was the master of the deal. The claim was no comfort. It was, he conceded, the only thing he could offer. She stood, her hands unsteady, questioning their entire future, a life lived in the crosshairs, forever waiting for the next attack. For now, he confirmed grimly. Yes, he defined the timeline for this state of siege until every single threat was swept from the game. The time frame he gave was a terrifying unknown, months, possibly more. She turned her back to him, a knot tightening her throat. The thought was madness, an unsustainable reality as a perpetual target. He vowed it wouldn't be, that he would see this to the very end. It was another promise he had no power to keep. The word slipped out, sharper than she intended, a sliver of her own fear that struck him like a blow. The flash of pain in his eyes brought a wave of instant, corrosive regret. She whispered an apology, admitting she was adrift, that she didn't know how to exist in this new reality without falling apart. He crossed the room in 2 strides, his glass forgotten. He told her she didn't need to endure it. She only had to trust him to be her armor. She confessed her faith was in him, but not in herself. He pulled her into his arms, his hand cradling the back of her head, his breath a warm oath against her skin. They would face this together, he murmured, taking one day after another. Arya let her eyes fall shut, sinking into the shelter of his hold. The unspoken inquiry hangs between them. What if this shatters us? His silent reply is a promise. From the wreckage, they will build something new. He refuses to lose her. Leaning away, she scans his expression, seeking the truth. His resolve is absolute. This bond, he seems to say, is most vital now in the heart of the storm. In answer, Arya kisses him, a raw, urgent gesture meant to blot out the world. For one suspended heartbeat, the danger, the uncertainty, and the terror vanish. There is only them, a small island of two in a Chicago suite as everything around them comes undone. When they finally part, he smooths a stray lock of hair from her cheek and proposes an escape. Her plea is simple, a single night of ordinary life. A real smile, a flicker of light in the encroaching gloom transforms Adrian's face. Normalcy, he can deliver. He takes her to a small Italian trattoria on a street hidden from the world. A place of checkered tablecloths and candlelight dancing in old wine bottles, a haven that is quiet, intimate, and mercifully normal. Inside this refuge, they declare a ceasefire, using wine and pasta as a bulwark against their truth. The conversation becomes a conscious retreat to the commonplace. Arya tells the story of an impossible design client. Adrian recounts a tale of a culinary experiment gone spectacularly wrong. The normality is so profound, it feels like a dream. Arya confesses she could get used to this, the quiet, private world they inhabit between these four walls. Adrian's entire demeanor softens as he agrees. When she challenges the truth of his words, he repeats a familiar creed. He never says a thing he doesn't mean. She has heard it from him before, and he explains its constant use is because its truth never wavers. Later, walking the river's edge, his hand in hers is a tether in the dark. She finally asks the question that has been hiding beneath every other thought. Why her? He could have cut the cord, let her disappear. His silence is short but deep. The answer, he says, was how she saw him. That night in the bar, she looked at him and saw just a man, not a puzzle to be solved or a threat to run from. He was just a man. And she had treasured a fantasy, seeing him as anything but what he was. And what is that? A possessive, dangerous man, one who solves his problems with brutally effective and illicit means. His eyes locked with hers. But you don't judge me for it. You aren't afraid. You just see me. And that is a priceless thing. A sharp ache bloomed in Arya's chest. You're not the monster you think you are. You have no idea of the things I've done. Maybe not, but I know who you are with me, and that's enough. Adrian stopped, turning to her completely. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but I am yours. He kissed her then, a slow, deep claiming that felt less like a surrender and more like a homecoming. They flew back to New York 2 days later. The Chicago deal was a success, Adrian told her. The competition had folded. The threat was gone. For now. It was always. For now. But Arya was learning to live in that suspended moment, to accept that their life together was built on a foundation of managed chaos. Her safety was a byproduct of his world, never a guarantee. Their version of normal was a finish line that always moved. She officially moved into his apartment on a rain-slicked Thursday, the last pieces of her Brooklyn existence relegated to a guest room she would never use. As Adrian unpacked her bags, carefully folding clothes and stacking novels, Arya watched him with a feeling that teetered dangerously close to love. "You don't have to do that," she said softly. "I can handle my own boxes." "I know I want to." "Why?" He looked at her, his expression utterly sincere. "Because this time you're not leaving, and I need this to be your home too." A lump formed in her throat. "Do you mean that?" "I only say things I mean." A laugh, broken by unshed tears, escaped her. "You need a new line." "Why? This one works." They finished the task, ordered food, and curled up on the sofa, tangled together in front of a movie that neither saw. And for the first time since that night of terror, Arya took a truly deep breath. 2 months after Luca's disappearance, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but some deep-seated instinct made her answer. "Hello?" A beat of silence, then a voice, completely broken. "Arya!" Ice flooded her system. "Luca!" "Please don't hang up." She should have. She should have cut the line and called Adrian, but the raw devastation in his voice paralyzed her. "What do you want?" I had to say I was sorry for everything. I know it changes nothing, but you needed to hear it." Arya's fingers clenched around the phone. "You stalked me. You threatened me. You tried to force me out of my home at gunpoint. And now you're sorry." "I was trapped and terrified, and I did monstrous things, but I never wanted to hurt you, Arya, I swear." "But you did hurt me. You used me." "I know, and I live with that." He took a ragged breath. "I'm calling to tell you that you're free, completely. I made a deal. With the Volkovs, with Adrian, with all of them. I gave them everything they wanted. And they swore an oath to leave you out of it forever." The air seemed to vanish from Arya's lungs. "Then what was the purpose of this revelation?" "Because what I am is a corruption you are too pure for. You always have been. I pray you see that. With him or some other man. Just find your happiness, Arya. It's the only thing I ask." The connection severed. For a long moment, Arya was a statue, the phone a cold weight in her hand as she tried to process the words. Then with purpose, she rose, her steps echoing as she went to Adrian's study and struck the door. "Come in!" She pushed the door wide. Adrian was a silhouette against his monitors, lost in a world of data. His head snapped up as she entered. "Are you hurt?" "I heard from Luca." The warmth in Adrian's expression froze over. "When?" "Moments ago, he called to offer an apology and to say he made a pact to vanish from my world for good." "He did. 3 weeks passed. I saw no reason to speak of it, believing his voice was the last thing you needed to hear." "You knew this call was coming?" "I considered it a possibility. He was to get my permission first." Arya's breath hitched. "Permission?" "It was a clause in our arrangement. He is granted a new life on the condition he abides by my terms. One was no contact unless I authorized it." "And you gave your authorization?" "It occurred to me you might need one final scene, a definitive ending, not just his absence leaving you with an unresolved narrative." The knot in Arya's throat pulled tighter. "You were right. I needed it." Adrian was on his feet, crossing the room to draw her into his arms. "It's done now. All of it. He's a ghost. The threat is neutralized, and you are safe. Absolutely, irrevocably safe." "And us? What does this make us?" Adrian pulled back, his hands cupping her face. "We are anything you want this to be." Arya's answer was a breath. "I want us to be indelible. Final. Without clauses or escape routes, just this." "Then that is what we are." The kiss he gave her then was a demolition, and in it, Arya felt the last pieces of her old life crumble to dust. The life where she was a supporting character, a pawn in a war, a secondary option. This one was hers, forged by truth and violence, and the beautiful madness of choosing to stay when flight was the only sane choice. 6 months on, Arya stands in Adrian's kitchen, their kitchen, the aroma of coffee filling the air as he concludes a call. She's landing bigger clients, rebuilding her name, and creating work that feels alive. Adrian had already begun to dismantle his more shadowed operations, channeling his formidable focus into legitimate empires that didn't demand a cost in blood. It wasn't a storybook ending. There were still hard conversations, moments where his brutal world scraped against hers with a violent shudder. But they fought for it to work, because the decision was always theirs, every single day. When Adrian appeared, his arms wound around her from behind, his chin settling on her shoulder. Morning. Good morning. She turned in his embrace to meet his eyes. What was the cost? Nothing of consequence, just tying off the last thread of the Vance Industries disaster. Is it really finished? It is finally finished! A true smile broke across Arya's face, the weight of the last year lifting like a shroud. So, what's the next act? A slow, knowing smirk touched Adrian's lips. Whatever we write, we can see the world, build a new dynasty, or just stand right here and drink coffee in the morning. It's all the same as long as it's with you. That's a hell of a promise. I'm aware. Are you sure you're ready for that? Adrian kissed her, a slow and searing thing. I've been ready since the night you told me to kiss you. Every second since then has just been me trying to get back to that single moment. A laugh, clear and unburdened, broke from Arya. Then I guess this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. As the morning light spilled into the room, bathing it in gold, the truth finally settled in Arya's bones. She'd spent a lifetime folding herself into shapes for others, trying to be the person they needed, and had forgotten how to just be. But here, with Adrian, she wasn't asked to be anything but what she was, flawed, fierce, and still finding her way, and he was all in. Not just putting up with her chaos, but treasuring her for it. That 10-second kiss in a loud, crowded club had altered the trajectory of her universe. It had closed a book and started a new, unwritten volume. And though the future was a mystery, though there would be storms and battles and moments she would question everything, Arya knew one thing with a chilling certainty. She was precisely where she was supposed to be, with the man who had promised to be her shield and held that vow as scripture, with the life she had built with her own 2 hands, not one she had fallen into, with the future that was hers to command. And that, she knew, as Adrian pulled her closer and kissed her again, was so much more than enough. It was her entire world,